Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into a story that sits at the very heart of mindfulness. Compassion, and the quest for inner peace, a story about a prince, a palace, and the profound journey that led him to discover a path out of suffering. Not just for himself, but for all of us. This isn't just an ancient legend, it's a human story about waking up. About seeing reality for what it truly is, and finding strength and clarity in the face of life's inevitable challenges. It's about how meditation, in its deepest sense, began as a radical act of looking inward when the outside world, even one built for perfect happiness, felt incomplete. So, settle in, let's travel back in time to a place of unimaginable beauty and comfort. To meet a young man on the cusp of a realization that would change the world forever. We're exploring the very roots of what many of you might be curious about as beginners in meditation, the why behind the practice. The deep-seated human need it addresses, and the incredible potential it holds. Imagine a life woven from threads of pure gold and silk. A world where every potential discomfort, every shadow, every discordant note was meticulously filtered out. This was the existence of Prince Siddhartha Gautama, born into the Sakya clan in the ancient kingdom of Kapilavastu. His father, King Suddhodana, was a ruler of immense power and foresight. There were prophecies surrounding Siddhartha's birth, prophecies that foretold he would either become a Chakravartin, a great world ruler, or a fully enlightened Buddha, a spiritual leader who would guide humanity. King Suddhodana, with the fierce love and ambition of a father, desperately wanted the former. He envisioned his son extending his dynasty, his kingdom, his legacy. To ensure this destiny, the king made a monumental, albeit ultimately futile, decision. He would shield Siddhartha from anything that could possibly steer him towards a spiritual path. He would protect him from suffering. And so, a life of unparalleled luxury and isolation was constructed. 3 palaces were built for the prince, one for each season, each more exquisite than the last. The gardens bloomed eternally, maintained by armies of gardeners who ensured not a single withered leaf marred the perfection. The air within the palace grounds was perpetually filled with the scent of flowers and exotic perfumes. Musicians played soothing melodies constantly, and dancers graced the prince with performances of captivating beauty. Food was a lavish affair, an endless banquet of the finest delicacies. Siddhartha was attended by hundreds, perhaps thousands, of servants, all instructed to present only beauty, health, and joy. No one old, sick, or sorrowful was allowed within his sight. If a servant fell ill, they were immediately removed. If someone grew old, they were reassigned. The very concept of decay, loss, or pain was a carefully guarded secret. This wasn't just opulence, it was a deliberate, artificial construct of reality. It was a golden cage, albeit one lined with the softest velvet and shimmering jewels. The king, through his sheer will and resources, attempted to create an environment where the universal laws of existence, the laws of impermanence, suffering, and change, which are intrinsically linked to the karmic cycles of birth and death, simply did not appear to apply. He built walls, not just of stone, but of illusion, hoping to trap his son in a perpetual present of youthful bliss. This was an attempt to control karma itself, to dictate the outcome of his son's life by manipulating the external conditions. The belief was that if Siddhartha never saw suffering, he would never contemplate it, and therefore never feel the need to seek a way out of it, thus remaining firmly on the path of a worldly ruler. From birth, Siddhartha knew only ease and pleasure. He was educated in arts, sciences, and warfare, mastering them all with natural brilliance. He married the beautiful princess Yasodhara, and they had a son, Rahula, meaning fetter or impediment, a name that hints, perhaps, at the king's subconscious fear that even family ties might bind Siddhartha to the world and away from his potential spiritual calling. Yet, even in this idyllic existence, shielded from every conceivable form of hardship, was true fulfillment possible? The profound irony of this perfect isolation is that it created a stark contrast with the reality that lay just beyond the palace walls. The very act of trying to eliminate suffering made its eventual discovery all the more impactful. Siddhartha lived, breathed, and thrived within this bubble of curated happiness. Yet, as the years passed, a subtle, perhaps even unconscious, question began to stir within him. Was this all there was? Was this effortless, unchanging perfection the entirety of existence? He had no concept of the struggles faced by ordinary people, the anxieties that gnawed at them, the inevitable physical decline, the pain of loss. He saw only the peak of the mountain, never the arduous climb or the valleys of shadow below. We can perhaps empathize with this. Even today, while few of us live in palaces of literal gold, we often build our own psychological golden cages. We surround ourselves with comfort, curate our social media feeds to show only the highlights, use entertainment and distraction to avoid confronting difficult emotions, or cling to the idea that if we just acquire enough possessions or achieve enough success, we will be permanently happy and immune to life's pains. We too, in our own ways, try to shield ourselves from the discomfort of change, loss, and the inherent impermanence of things we cherish. Siddhartha's initial state, though extreme, mirrors our own tendency to avoid the unpleasant truths of existence. But the nature of reality, the cycle of karma and impermanence, is relentless. It cannot be permanently held at bay by walls, no matter how high, or by illusions, no matter how convincing. The seed of curiosity, the natural human drive to understand the world fully, lay dormant within Siddhartha. The king's elaborate plan, designed to suppress any inkling of suffering and keep Siddhartha bound to worldly power, was ultimately based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the deeper forces at play, the inherent impermanence of all conditioned phenomena and the inner yearning for truth that can arise even amidst perfect comfort. The karma that would lead Siddhartha to seek enlightenment was already unfolding. Seeded by countless past lives and ripening in this one, the perfect bubble was destined to burst. Not because of external force, but because the reality it sought to exclude was simply too vast, too fundamental, to be contained forever. The carefully constructed illusion of eternal youth and joy was about to collide head-on with the undeniable truth of suffering. Yet, no amount of gold or guards could forever contain the restless energy of a curious mind, or the unfolding of a destiny shaped by countless past actions and intentions. As Siddhartha grew into a young man, the perfectly manicured world within the palace walls, for all its beauty, began to feel contained. He had mastered every art, every sport, every pleasure offered to him. Yet a subtle, unnamed longing persisted, an urge, perhaps karmically driven, to see beyond the familiar, to understand the realm that existed outside his gilded cage. The king, ever watchful, sensed this growing desire. He agreed to allow Siddhartha to venture outside, but with extreme caution. He ordered the roads to be cleared of anything unsightly or disturbing. The path was swept, flowers were strewn, and only young, healthy, and joyful people were permitted to line the streets. It was another attempt to replicate the palace's artificial perfection, to extend the illusion further. But the forces of reality, the undeniable truth of impermanence and the inherent suffering woven into the fabric of conditioned existence, were far more powerful than any king's decree. Karma, in its relentless unfolding, ensures that effects follow causes, and the cause of conditioned existence is ultimately suffering, change, and death. Siddhartha was born into this cycle, and the time had come for him to witness its undeniable truth. On his first excursion, despite the king's best efforts, the veil began to lift. Siddhartha, riding in his chariot with his loyal charioteer Channa, saw someone he had never imagined could exist. There, by the side of the road, was a person bent and frail, their skin wrinkled and spotted, their hair white and sparse. They trembled with every step, leaning heavily on a stick. Siddhartha had never seen anything like it. Everyone he knew was young, vibrant, full of life. "Channa," he asked, his voice filled with confusion. "Who is this person? What has happened to them?" Channa, hesitant but bound by the truth, explained, "My lord, this is an old person. It is the way of all human beings. If they live long enough, their bodies decay, their strength wanes, and they become like this." Siddhartha was stunned. Old age. He had never conceived of such a thing. He looked at his own youthful, strong body and felt a chill. Was this his future? Was this the future of everyone he loved? The carefree joy of his excursion evaporated, replaced by a profound disquiet. He returned to the palace, but the image of the aged figure was seared into his mind. The perfectly constructed world no longer felt so solid. The first crack had appeared in the golden cage. Some time later, a second excursion was arranged. again with precautions taken by the king. But again, reality asserted itself. Along the road, Siddhartha saw a person writhing in agony. Their body emaciated and discolored. Their breath ragged, clearly in immense pain. People around them looked on with a mixture of fear and pity. "Channa," Siddhartha asked, his voice now tinged with alarm. "What is wrong with this person? Why do they look so tormented?" "My lord," Channa replied, his tone heavy, "this is a sick person. Illness is a condition that can afflict anyone. It weakens the body, causes great suffering, and can even lead to death." Sickness, another unknown terror. Siddhartha had only ever known robust health. The vulnerability of the physical form, the susceptibility to pain and suffering, struck him with full force. He realized that even a strong, youthful body was no guarantee against such affliction. The palace doctors kept everyone within the walls healthy. But outside, sickness was a stark, undeniable reality. The fear of decay now compounded with the fear of pain and physical breakdown. The second crack deepened in the golden cage. The third excursion brought the most confronting sight of all. Siddhartha encountered a procession of people carrying a shrouded body. Their faces were etched with grief. Their cries filled the air with sorrow. "Channa," Siddhartha asked, his voice barely a whisper. "What are these people doing? Why are they weeping?" Channa, with immense sadness, explained, "My lord, this is a dead person. Their life has ended. This is the final state for all beings who are born. Their body is no longer animated, and those who loved them mourn their passing. Death, the ultimate, irreversible end." Siddhartha had witnessed the beginning, birth, and the continuation, life. But the concept of a definitive end was utterly alien. He saw the finality of it, the separation from loved ones, the cessation of existence as he knew it. This wasn't just a crack, it was a shattering blow to the foundation of his reality. Old age and sickness were stages. But death was the conclusion. The realization dawned on him with terrifying clarity. Everyone, himself included, was subject to this fate. The cycle of birth, growth, decay, sickness, and death was not a rare occurrence. It was the universal law governing all conditioned life. This was the inescapable karmic reality. These three sights, old age, sickness, and death, impacted Siddhartha with a force that words can barely describe. They weren't just external observations, they were mirrors reflecting the impermanence and inherent suffering of his own existence. And the existence of everyone he knew. His privileged life, designed to exclude these truths, had ironically made their encounter all the more potent. He saw the futility of clinging to youth, health, and life, knowing they were all fleeting. The perfect world of the palace now seemed like a hollow, temporary illusion. A fragile shell protecting him from an ocean of inevitable suffering. He returned from these excursions a changed man. The laughter felt forced, the music discordant, the beauty of the palace felt superficial. How could anyone truly find lasting happiness or peace when these terrifying realities loomed over every life? The existential questions burned within him. Why do we suffer? Is there no escape? What is the meaning of a life destined for decay, illness, and death? The sheer weight of this realization, the undeniable truth of the karmic cycle of suffering, became unbearable. It was on a subsequent excursion that Siddhartha encountered the fourth sight. One that offered the first glimmer of hope in this newly revealed landscape of suffering. He saw an ascetic, a wandering renunciant, dressed simply, with a calm demeanor and a peaceful expression despite owning nothing. This person seemed untouched by the anxieties that plagued ordinary people, possessing an inner peace that Siddhartha had never witnessed before. "Channa," he asked, intrigue replacing his despair. "Who is this person?" "My lord," Channa replied, "this is a renunciant, one who has given up worldly life to seek spiritual liberation, to find a way beyond suffering." In that moment, amidst the overwhelming evidence of life's unavoidable pain, the image of the peaceful ascetic shone like a beacon. It suggested that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a path, a way to transcend the cycle of suffering he had just discovered. The first three sights revealed the problem, the universal reality of dukkha, suffering, unsatisfactoriness, inherent in conditioned existence. The fourth sight offered the first hint of a possible solution, the path of spiritual seeking, of turning inwards, of renunciation. which would eventually lead Siddhartha to the practice of meditation as the primary tool for inner transformation and liberation. The stage was set for a monumental decision, a turning point not only for Siddhartha himself, but for the future of human understanding regarding the nature of reality and the potential for ending suffering. The comfortable dream was over, the arduous, yet ultimately liberating, quest for truth was about to begin. The contrast between the serene countenance of the ascetic and the raw, unavoidable suffering he had witnessed in old age, sickness, and death struck Siddhartha to the core. He had seen the problem in its starkest form, the inherent fragility and impermanence of life. The inescapable grip of the karmic cycle that brought beings through birth to inevitable decay and cessation. The golden cage built by his father, designed to shield him from this very reality, had burst. The illusion of a perfect, unchanging existence was shattered. The realization wasn't merely intellectual, it was visceral, shaking him to his very foundations. He understood, with chilling clarity, that his own life, no matter how privileged, was subject to these same universal laws. His youth would fade, his health would falter, and eventually, he too would die. This wasn't a distant possibility, it was his destiny, shared with every living being. This profound understanding of dukkha, the Buddhist concept often translated as suffering, but encompassing a deeper sense of unsatisfactoriness, stress, and inherent unease that pervades conditioned existence, weighed heavily on him. It wasn't just physical pain or emotional sorrow, it was the fundamental suffering that arises from clinging to things that are impermanent, from desiring what is constantly changing, from identifying with a self that is not fixed or permanent. He saw that all conditioned phenomena, everything that arises and passes away, his beautiful palaces, his loving family, his own youthful body, even his thoughts and feelings, were subject to decay and dissolution. Clinging to them, expecting them to provide lasting happiness, was the root cause of further suffering. This is a core principle of karma. Actions driven by craving and attachment perpetuate the cycle of suffering. The encounter with the peaceful ascetic, however, offered a different perspective. It was a living embodiment of the possibility of liberation, a sign that it might be possible to live in the world, to be aware of suffering, and yet not be crushed by it. The ascetic seemed to possess an inner stillness, a freedom from the anxieties that tormented ordinary people. This wasn't the freedom of ignorance, the kind his father had tried to create, but a freedom that seemed to come from facing reality directly and finding a way to transcend its limitations. It was the first hint of a path that moved beyond the cycle of cause and effect, karma, within the realm of suffering, towards a state unconditioned and free. The cumulative effect of these foresights was overwhelming. The life he had lived, the future planned for him, suddenly felt meaningless in the face of these undeniable truths. How could he inherit a kingdom, indulge in pleasures, and perpetuate a cycle of power and attachment, knowing that old age, sickness, and death awaited everyone, himself included? The thought of returning to his luxurious life felt suffocating. He saw the palace now not as a haven, but as a trap, a beautiful prison that kept him bound to ignorance and the inevitable suffering that ignorance brings. He was a prince with everything, yet he felt an emptiness, a profound lack of true peace and security. He understood that external conditions, no matter how perfect, could not provide lasting happiness because they were inherently impermanent. True peace must come from within, from a transformation of the mind itself. The karmic ripening of his past virtuous actions had led him to this critical juncture, where the suffering of the world became unbearable enough to ignite a powerful intention for liberation. The decision crystallized within him. He could not remain in the palace, perpetuating a life based on illusion and destined for the same suffering he had witnessed. He had to find a way out, not just for himself, but for all beings trapped in this cycle. The serene face of the ascetic became his guidepost, a symbol of the possibility of transcending suffering through spiritual pursuit. This wasn't a hasty decision driven by fleeting emotion. It was the result of a deep, existential crisis, a confrontation with the fundamental nature of reality. The comfort and security of his life had been stripped away, revealing the raw, vulnerable core of human existence. The path forward was uncertain, fraught with hardship and unknown challenges. But the path he was on, the path of a worldly ruler bound to the cycle of birth and death, was no longer an option. The suffering he had witnessed was a call to action, a powerful catalyst for change. He realized that to truly understand suffering and find a way to end it, he had to immerse himself in the very world he had been shielded from. He had to become like the ascetic, abandoning the comforts and distractions of his privileged life, facing hardship willingly, and seeking wisdom through direct experience and inner exploration. This was the only way to break free from the cycle of karma driven by craving and ignorance. The decision was monumental, the great renunciation. It meant leaving behind everything he had ever known and loved, his father who adored him, his beloved wife Yasodhara, his infant son Rahula, his kingdom, his future as a ruler. It required immense courage and a profound sense of purpose, fueled by compassion for the suffering of others and an unwavering determination to find the truth. This act of renunciation is a pivotal moment in the story, highlighting the principle that significant change, especially spiritual transformation, often requires letting go of what is familiar and comfortable. It is an act of stepping outside the established patterns and expectations, which can be seen as personal karmic tendencies and societal structures, to forge a new path. Siddhartha's decision was not an abandonment of responsibility in a negative sense, but a higher calling, a recognition that the greatest service he could render to the world was to find the ultimate truth that could liberate all beings from suffering. He made his preparations in secret, knowing his father would never consent. One night, while his family slept, he took one last look at his wife and child, a moment surely filled with profound tenderness and sorrow, yet overshadowed by the urgency of his quest. He mounted his horse, Kanthaka, and with Channa by his side, rode out of the palace gates, leaving behind the golden cage and everything it represented. The world outside was vast, unknown, and filled with the suffering he had only recently glimpsed. But it also held the promise of truth, the possibility of finding a path to liberation, a path that would ultimately be revealed through the practice of meditation and deep introspection. His journey from a prince of comfort to a wandering ascetic seeking enlightenment had begun. Driven by the undeniable reality of suffering and the hope offered by the path of spiritual seeking. This was the karmic unfolding of a being destined to become a Buddha. Stepping outside the palace walls was not just a physical departure, it was a radical severing of ties. A symbolic rejection of the life he was born into and the future that had been meticulously planned for him. Having ridden through the night, Siddhartha stopped at the edge of a forest. He dismounted Kanthaka, removed his princely garments and jewels, and handed them to Channa. He cut off his long hair, a symbol of his royal status, and exchanged his luxurious clothes for the simple robe of an ascetic he encountered. This was a powerful act of shedding his identity, of embracing the unknown. Driven by the burning question ignited by the four sights, how to end suffering, he instructed Channa to take Kanthaka back to the palace and inform the king of his decision. Channa, heartbroken, pleaded with him to return, but Siddhartha's resolve was unwavering. His quest for truth transcended all personal attachments. Now simply Gautama, the wanderer, he began his search for the answer to suffering. He knew he couldn't find it in wealth, power, or pleasure, the very things he had renounced. The answer had to lie elsewhere, perhaps in the wisdom of those who had dedicated their lives to spiritual pursuits. He had seen the peace in the ascetic's face, and he sought to understand the source of that inner freedom. His journey was one of intense seeking, propelled by the urgent karma of a being on the cusp of profound awakening. His first step was to seek out the most renowned spiritual teachers of his time. This period in ancient India was a fertile ground for philosophical and religious inquiry. Many different schools of thought, ascetic practices, and meditation techniques existed, each offering a unique perspective on the nature of reality, the cause of suffering, and the path to liberation. Gautama, with his sharp intellect and deep commitment, was eager to learn from the masters. He first went to Alara Kalama, a respected teacher who taught a form of meditation leading to high states of absorption or trance, often referred to as jhanas in Buddhist texts. Alara Kalama taught Gautama his doctrine and method, which involved progressively calming the mind, withdrawing from sensory input, and entering increasingly subtle states of consciousness. Gautama applied himself diligently to the practice. His natural capacity for concentration was extraordinary. He quickly mastered everything Alara Kalama taught, reaching the highest meditative state his teacher could attain, the sphere of nothingness. Alara Kalama recognized Gautama's exceptional ability and offered him a position of equal standing, inviting him to help lead his community of disciples. However, while these deep states of concentration brought temporary peace and a sense of transcendence, Gautama realized they did not offer a permanent solution to suffering. He could enter these states and escape the discomforts of the physical world and the turmoil of ordinary thoughts and emotions. But when he emerged from meditation, the fundamental realities of old age, sickness, and death still existed. The root causes of suffering, craving, aversion, and ignorance were still present in the mind, merely temporarily suppressed by the concentration. He had reached the limits of Alara Kalama's teaching, and it did not provide the ultimate liberation he sought. It was a powerful tool for calming the mind, but not for fundamentally changing the mind's relationship with reality. This experience taught him that merely achieving altered states of consciousness was not the end goal. True liberation required something deeper. Undeterred, Gautama sought out another prominent teacher, Uddaka Ramapada. Uddaka Ramapada also taught advanced meditation techniques, his practice leading to an even subtler state of absorption, the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. Again, Gautama applied himself with intense effort and soon mastered this level of meditation, achieving the same state as his teacher. Uddaka Ramapada, like Alara Kalama, was deeply impressed by Gautama's rapid progress and offered him leadership within his community. But once more, Gautama found the same limitation. While the state of neither perception nor non-perception was incredibly refined and peaceful, it was still a conditioned state, impermanent and subject to arising and passing away. It did not reveal the fundamental nature of reality or offer a path to the complete cessation of suffering. He had gone as far as Uddaka Ramapada could take him, and the ultimate truth remained elusive. These experiences with renowned teachers were crucial steps in Gautama's journey. They showed him the potential of the mind to achieve deep states of concentration and peace through meditation. He learned valuable techniques for stilling the mind and developing focus. However, he also learned their limitations. He realized that liberation could not be found solely through achieving blissful or formless states of absorption. These states, while pleasant and powerful, did not eradicate the ignorance that bound beings to the cycle of suffering driven by karma. They did not lead to a direct insight into the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path to its cessation. His experiences reinforced the understanding that clinging, even clinging to pleasant meditative states, perpetuated the cycle. True liberation required a different approach, one that addressed the root causes of suffering by cultivating wisdom and direct insight into the nature of reality, vipassana. He needed to move beyond mere concentration, samatha, to cultivate profound understanding. Dissatisfied with the existing paths, Gautama decided he had to find the truth for himself. He had learned from masters, practiced their techniques to the highest degree, but the fundamental problem of suffering remained. He realized that the path to liberation was not one he could simply be taught. It was one he had to discover through his own direct experience and deep internal exploration. This realization marked a significant turning point. Having exhausted the conventional avenues of spiritual seeking, Gautama decided to embark on a path of extreme asceticism, a practice widely believed at the time to be the surest way to conquer the physical body and its desires, thereby liberating the spirit. He had seen the ascetic who inspired him, but now he was determined to take the path of self-mortification to its absolute limit, believing that by eliminating all physical comfort and enduring extreme hardship, he could purify himself and break free from the bonds of existence. This new phase of his journey would push him to the brink of death, ultimately leading him to reject extreme practices and find the revolutionary path that would become the foundation of his teaching, the middle path. His karmic journey was guiding him through different experiences, each one providing a piece of the puzzle, leading him closer to the ultimate insight. Driven by the conviction that the path to liberation lay in conquering the physical body and its demands, Gautama embarked on a period of extreme asceticism. He joined a group of 5 ascetics who were practicing severe self-mortification near Uruvela. These 5, Khandana, Bhaddiya, Vapa, Mahanama, and Asaji, respected Gautama's royal background and his dedication to the spiritual quest. and they hoped to learn from him if he found the ultimate truth. This practice of tapasya, or austerity, was common among spiritual seekers of the time, based on the belief that punishing the body would purify the mind and lead to spiritual insight. It was a path of deliberately creating suffering in the physical realm, hoping this would somehow negate the suffering of existence. Gautama, ever the intense and dedicated seeker, pushed the boundaries of asceticism far beyond what most practitioners endured. He subjected himself to the most rigorous and painful practices. He drastically reduced his intake of food, eating only a single grain of rice or sesame seed a day. His body became emaciated, reduced to skin and bones. The scriptures describe him as being so thin that when he touched his stomach, he could feel his backbone, and his limbs were like the knotty joints of withered creepers. His skin became dark and withered, and his hair fell out. He practiced breath-holding exercises to the point of extreme pain, feeling as though sharp cords were binding his head, or as if a butcher was slicing his body with a sharp knife. He exposed himself to the elements, enduring scorching heat in the summer and freezing cold in the winter. Wearing only rags or nothing at all. He slept on beds of thorns or on the bare ground. He deliberately suppressed all bodily needs and desires, pushing himself to the absolute limit of human endurance. His rationale was that the body, with its needs and desires for food, comfort, and pleasure, was a source of attachment and therefore a cause of suffering. By denying the body, by making it suffer, he believed he could break its hold over the mind and achieve liberation. He was attempting to use physical pain to overcome the fundamental suffering of existence. A karmic reaction seeking to counteract the effects of past actions through intense, voluntary hardship. He believed that purifying the physical vessel was the necessary step to purifying the mind and breaking free from the cycle of birth and death. For 6 long years, Gautama practiced these extreme austerities with unwavering determination. His 5 companions watched him with awe, convinced that if anyone could achieve enlightenment through self-mortification, it would be Gautama. He endured pain and hardship that would have killed lesser individuals, his iron will fueled by his burning desire to find a way out of suffering. He explored the limits of physical pain and deprivation, hoping to find a point where the mind would be freed from the constraints of the body. He experienced moments of intense concentration and altered states induced by his weakened physical state. But these were fleeting and did not bring the fundamental insight he sought. Instead, he found himself consumed by the struggle for survival, his mind fixated on the intense physical discomfort rather than on cultivating wisdom. The karmic effect of these extreme austerities was not the expected liberation, but rather a profound exhaustion and a clear understanding of their futility. He realized that a body brought to the brink of death was not a suitable vessel for deep spiritual practice. His mind was weakened, clouded by hunger and pain, unable to focus clearly or gain deep insight into the nature of reality. He was so close to death that he thought he might not survive. And the ultimate truth still eluded him. He reflected on his experiences with Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta, where he had achieved high states of mental absorption through concentration. Those practices brought temporary peace but didn't address the root of suffering. Now, extreme asceticism brought intense physical suffering but also failed to bring fundamental liberation. Neither extreme, self-indulgence, the life he left behind, nor self-mortification, the path he was on, seemed to lead to the cessation of suffering. Lying near death by the Niranjana river, Gautama had a profound realization. He recalled a childhood memory, sitting under a rose apple tree while his father performed a plowing ceremony. He had spontaneously entered a state of deep concentration and peace, a state that was pleasant and refreshing, not born of deprivation or struggle. He realized that true concentration and insight required a certain level of physical well-being and mental clarity, neither of which he possessed in his current state. The body was not the enemy to be vanquished but the vehicle for awakening. This realization was a pivotal moment. He saw that his 6 years of extreme austerity had been based on a flawed premise. Liberation did not come from inflicting pain on the body or indulging its desires, but from finding a balance, a middle way. The path was not through extremes, but through moderation, through cultivating both a calm mind and a body strong enough to support deep practice. This understanding was a direct outcome of the karma of his intense experiences, The suffering caused by his extreme practices led him to see their error and the necessity of a balanced approach. He decided to abandon his severe ascetic practices. This was a difficult decision, as it meant admitting that 6 years of intense suffering had not yielded the desired result. And it meant going against the prevailing wisdom of many spiritual seekers of his time. More significantly, it meant disappointing his 5 companions, who saw his move away from asceticism as a sign of weakness. A return to a life of comfort and indulgence. They abandoned him, believing he had given up on the quest for enlightenment. Alone, and at the brink of death, Gautama accepted an offering of milk rice from a young woman named Sujata. Sujata, seeing his emaciated form, believed him to be a tree spirit and offered the milk rice as a devotional offering. Accepting nourishment was a revolutionary act for an ascetic of his caliber. It signified his rejection of extreme self-denial and his embrace of a different path. As he consumed the meal, strength slowly returned to his body. His mind, no longer consumed by the agony of starvation and pain, began to clear. He realized that a healthy body was not an impediment to spiritual progress, but a necessary foundation. This simple meal was the turning point, providing the physical sustenance needed for the final, most crucial stage of his journey, the deep meditation under the Bodhi tree that would lead to his awakening. The karmic wheel turned, moving from the extreme suffering of asceticism towards the balanced approach that would unlock ultimate liberation. Revitalized by the milk rice, Gautama felt strength returning to his emaciated body. His mind, previously clouded by the agony of starvation and suffering, became clearer, more focused. He had reached the absolute limit of self-mortification and found it wanting. He had learned from the esteemed teachers and mastered their techniques, only to find they did not offer ultimate liberation. Through these experiences, he had eliminated the extremes, the indulgence of his princely life and the severe deprivation of asceticism. He now saw the wisdom of the middle path, a way of balance that avoids both sensual pleasure and self-torture. This realization, hard-won through intense suffering and seeking, was a crucial insight, a direct result of the karma of his 6 years of struggle. The suffering he endured led him to see the fallacy of his approach, paving the way for the true path. With renewed physical and mental vigor, Gautama set out towards the town of Gaya, seeking a suitable place for deep meditation. He knew that the answer he sought would not come from external practices or teachers, but from within, through profound introspection and direct insight into the nature of reality. He needed a quiet, secluded spot where he could fully dedicate himself to this inner exploration. Allowing the karma of countless virtuous actions and his intense seeking in this life to culminate in the ultimate understanding. He found a large, majestic fig tree on the banks of the Niranjana River, a place that seemed imbued with a sense of peace and tranquility. It was here, under this tree, which would later be known as the Bodhi tree, the tree of awakening, that he decided to make his final stand. He spread a mat of kusha grass and sat down, facing east. This act of sitting was not merely physical, it was a powerful declaration of intent. Having tried the paths of pleasure, worldly power, advanced concentration, and extreme asceticism, he now turned solely to the power of his own mind. Guided by the principle of the middle path, he was not seeking a temporary escape or a mystical experience, but a fundamental understanding of the nature of suffering and its cessation. He made a powerful, unwavering vow. I will not rise from this spot until I have attained full enlightenment. Even if my body withers away and my skin, bones, and sinews fall apart. This was a commitment of absolute determination, a karmic resolve to push through all obstacles, internal and external, until the ultimate truth was realized. He knew that the path to liberation was arduous, requiring immense perseverance and courage. He was ready to face whatever arose, including the deepest fears and illusions within his own mind. As he settled into deep meditation, his mind became calm and focused. The practices he had learned from Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramapada, while not sufficient for ultimate liberation on their own, had honed his ability to concentrate. Now, combining this focused attention, samatha, with his newfound understanding of the middle path and the urgency of his quest, he began to cultivate insight, vipassana, into the nature of reality. This period of meditation under the Bodhi tree is depicted as a profound internal struggle. a confrontation with the forces that keep beings bound to the cycle of suffering. These forces are often personified as Mara, the tempter, or the evil one, who represents all obstacles to enlightenment: desire, aversion, delusion, fear, doubt, and ego. Mara is not just an external demon. He is the manifestation of the internal hindrances that arise from our own unskillful karma and ignorance. As Gautama's meditation deepened, Mara launched his attack. The first wave was one of temptation. Mara sent his beautiful daughters, craving, discontent, and desire, to seduce Gautama, attempting to lure him back to the pleasures of the senses, the life of comfort he had renounced. They appeared in various alluring forms, promising worldly delights and sensual gratification. But Gautama remained unmoved, his mind steadfastly focused on his goal. He saw through the illusion of temporary pleasure, understanding that clinging to desire only leads to more suffering, perpetuating the karmic cycle. He recognized the emptiness of these temptations, having experienced the fleeting nature of pleasure firsthand in the palace. When temptation failed, Mara resorted to fear and intimidation. He gathered his terrifying army, a host of demons and monstrous figures wielding weapons and spewing fire. They roared, they threatened, they conjured terrifying visions of destruction and death. They represented the fears that arise in the mind when one seeks to transcend the limitations of the ego and confront the unknown. The fear of loss, the fear of not-self, the fear of annihilation. These are the karmic fears that keep us clinging to existence as we know it. But Gautama sat unperturbed. He saw the projections of Mara's army not as external threats, but as manifestations of his own internal fears and doubts. He met their aggression with unshakable equanimity, his mind like a mountain unshaken by the wind. He understood that these were merely conditioned phenomena, arising and passing away, without any inherent power to harm him if he did not give them power through his own fear and reactivity. His practice of the middle path had cultivated the inner strength and clarity to face these internal storms. Mara's final assault was psychological, an attempt to undermine Gautama's confidence and right to seek enlightenment. Mara appeared before him and questioned his worthiness. "Who are you to sit there and seek enlightenment?" Mara challenged. "What right do you have to claim such a goal? You have no merit, no power to achieve this." This attack targeted the core of Gautama's aspiration, attempting to sow seeds of doubt and inadequacy. Mara claimed that all of Gautama's efforts, all his past virtuous actions and intense seeking, his good karma, were insufficient. This was the most subtle and dangerous attack, the challenge to his very intention. Questioning the validity of his quest, it represented the internal voice of doubt, the ego's resistance to transformation, the fear that one is not good enough or capable of achieving profound spiritual awakening. This internal battle, fueled by past conditioning and karmic tendencies towards self-doubt, is often the final hurdle on the path to liberation. Gautama faced this challenge directly, not with aggression, but with quiet strength. He needed to provide proof, not to Mara, but to himself and the universal principles of karma, that his aspiration was justified and his accumulated merit was sufficient. The stage was set for the final act of this epic internal struggle, where the answer would come not through debate or physical might, but through a simple, profound gesture. Facing Mara's final, insidious challenge, the questioning of his worthiness and right to seek enlightenment, Gautama remained steadfast. He had endured temptations, faced terrifying illusions, and now confronted the subtlest form of resistance, the doubt planted by the force that seeks to keep beings bound to the cycle of suffering. Mara's challenge was rooted in the logic of conventional existence and the accumulated karma within that cycle. Only those with immense merit, with a vast history of virtuous actions, could possibly aspire to such a lofty goal as full enlightenment. Mara implied that Gautama, despite his efforts, did not possess this qualification. Gautama understood that words would not suffice against this force. He needed to provide irrefutable evidence, a witness to the immense store of positive karma, the countless acts of generosity, morality, and meditation accumulated not just in this life, but over innumerable past lifetimes of striving for awakening. According to the teachings, a Buddha is not created in a single lifetime. The potential for Buddhahood is cultivated over vast eons through the perfection of virtues, the paramitas. Siddhartha Gautama's present life was the culmination of this incredibly long karmic journey. Without speaking, Siddhartha simply reached down with his right hand and touched the earth. It was a simple, yet profoundly powerful gesture. By touching the earth, he called upon the earth itself to bear witness to his accumulated merit. To the countless sacrifices and virtuous deeds he had performed throughout his innumerable past lives on the path to Buddhahood. The earth, as the silent witness to all actions, all karma, was the perfect, impartial arbiter. In response to his gesture, the earth is said to have trembled, or a voice from the earth arose, proclaiming, "I bear you witness." This act symbolized the deep connection between the aspirant and the ground of being. The acknowledgement that the path to awakening is rooted in reality, not fantasy. It affirmed that his aspiration and efforts were valid, supported by the very fabric of existence, forged through the consistent application of positive karma over vast stretches of time. With the earth as his witness, Mara's challenge dissolved. The forces of temptation, fear, and doubt, represented by Mara and his army, were vanquished. They represented the internal obstacles that arise from the karmic conditioning of the unenlightened mind. By recognizing them as such, by not being swayed by their illusions or threats, and by grounding himself in the accumulated merit of his journey, Gautama transcended their power. Mara, defeated, retreated. The path was clear for the final, deepest penetration of reality. Having overcome the external and internal obstacles, Gautama settled into the deepest possible state of meditation. The hindrances, sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt, which are fueled by unskillful karma and prevent the mind from seeing clearly, were silenced. His mind was now perfectly focused, calm, and luminous, a prepared vessel for receiving the profound truths of the universe. The night progressed, and as he sat under the Bodhi tree, Gautama's awareness expanded. This was not a passive state, but an active process of profound insight and understanding, vipassana. He began to see the true nature of reality, not through intellectual reasoning or received doctrine, but through direct, intuitive realization. In the first watch of the night, evening, he directed his mind to the knowledge of his own past lives. He saw clearly, as if watching a film, the countless existences he had lived, his births, deaths, and rebirths in various realms, under different forms, experiencing diverse joys and sorrows. He saw the intricate web of cause and effect, karma, that had shaped each life. The actions performed and their consequences unfolding across time. He understood how his own past karma had led him to this very moment. This life as Prince Siddhartha, his renunciation, his search, and his sitting under the Bodhi tree. This was the first profound insight, understanding the personal karmic journey and the continuous cycle of rebirth driven by action and consequence. In the second watch of the night, middle of the night, he directed his mind to the knowledge of the passing away and reappearing of beings. He gained the divine eye, the ability to see the cycle of birth and death of all beings throughout the universe. He saw how beings are reborn according to their karma. Those who performed skillful actions were reborn in fortunate circumstances, while those who performed unskillful actions were reborn in unfortunate states. He saw the universal nature of the karmic cycle, the endless round of existence driven by cause and effect, fueled by ignorance and craving. This was the second profound insight, understanding the universal karmic law governing all sentient beings and the suffering inherent in this cycle. These two insights, the understanding of personal karma and the understanding of universal karma and rebirth, were incredibly significant. They confirmed the reality of the cycle of suffering and the power of actions, karma, in shaping destiny. But they did not yet reveal the way out of the cycle. He saw the problem clearly, in its personal and universal dimensions. But the solution remained to be discovered. The suffering caused by the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, samsara, was undeniable. He needed to find the path to its cessation. As the third watch of the night began, late night, Gautama directed his mind towards the most crucial insight, the understanding of the Four Noble Truths. These truths are the fundamental framework of Buddhist philosophy and practice, providing both the diagnosis of suffering and the prescription for its end. He understood the first noble truth, the truth of suffering, dukkha. He saw clearly that all conditioned existence is inherently unsatisfactory, characterized by suffering, stress, and unease. This wasn't just obvious pain, but the suffering of change, the suffering of impermanence, the suffering inherent in the cycle of birth, aging, sickness, and death. He saw that even pleasure is a form of suffering because it is impermanent and clinging to it inevitably leads to pain when it passes. He understood the second noble truth, the truth of the origin of suffering, samudaya. He saw that the root cause of this suffering is craving, attachment, and clinging, tanha, the desire for sensual pleasures, the desire for existence, and the desire for non-existence. This craving is fueled by ignorance, avidya, the fundamental misunderstanding of the true nature of reality, particularly the concepts of impermanence, suffering, and non-self. This craving is the driving force behind the karmic cycle, creating the conditions for continued rebirth and suffering. He understood the third noble truth, the truth of the cessation of suffering, nirodha. This was the breakthrough, the realization that suffering is not an inherent, unavoidable part of existence. It can be ended. By fully understanding and eradicating craving, attachment, and ignorance, the cycle of suffering can be broken, leading to a state of liberation, nirvana. He understood the fourth noble truth, the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering, magga. This is the practical guide, the way to achieve nirvana. This path is the Eightfold Path, a set of 8 interconnected practices: right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This was the middle path in practice, a way of living and cultivating the mind that leads away from suffering and towards liberation. This path is the way to skillfully create positive karma and ultimately transcend the entire karmic cycle of suffering. As he fully grasped these 4 noble truths, understanding them in all their aspects and implications, and as the morning star appeared in the eastern sky, Siddhartha Gautama attained full and complete enlightenment, Sambodhi. He became the Buddha, the awakened one. The golden cage of his former life was not just broken, it was dissolved. The cycle of suffering, driven by ignorance and craving, was shattered. He saw reality as it truly is, impermanent, unsatisfactory, and without a permanent, independent self. He had found the way to end suffering, not by escaping the world, but by transforming his understanding and relationship to it. This was the culmination of his long karmic journey, the fruition of countless eons of aspiration and effort. The promise of the ascetic's peace was revealed, and it was found within, through the power of deep meditation and profound insight into the nature of things. Having attained the highest possible state of understanding, Siddhartha Gautama, now the Buddha, spent the next 7 weeks in the vicinity of the Bodhi tree. Experiencing the profound bliss of liberation, he sat under different trees, reflecting on the truths he had realized. This period of post-enlightenment contemplation is significant. It wasn't merely rest, but a deep absorption in the reality he had penetrated, solidifying his understanding and preparing him for the task ahead. He had seen the intricate workings of karma, the suffering inherent in the cycle of rebirth, and the path to its cessation. He fully understood the 4 noble truths and the Eightfold Path as the means to break free from this cycle. The state of nirvana he had realized was beyond description in conventional terms. It was the cessation of craving, aversion, and ignorance, the extinguishing of the fires that fuel suffering. It was a state of profound peace, clarity, and freedom, unconditioned by the transient nature of worldly phenomena. He had transcended the limitations of ordinary consciousness, seeing the interconnectedness of all things and the emptiness of inherent self. The karmic forces that bind beings to suffering no longer had a hold on him. A question arose in the Buddha's mind: should he teach the Dharma, the truth, the path he had discovered, to others? He realized the depth and subtlety of what he had understood. The 4 noble truths and the Eightfold Path required a fundamental shift in perspective, a willingness to let go of deeply ingrained habits of mind, particularly the attachment to a solid, permanent self and the craving for pleasure and existence. He contemplated that perhaps this truth was too profound, too difficult for ordinary beings, caught as they were in the thickets of desire, aversion, and delusion, constantly generating karma that perpetuated their suffering. He saw how deeply attached people were to their views, their possessions, their identities, all of which were ultimately impermanent and sources of pain. The path to liberation required radical change, and he wondered if anyone would be able to understand and follow it. It is said that the deity Brahma Sahampati, understanding the Buddha's hesitation and the immense potential for good that his teaching could bring, appeared before him and implored him to teach. Brahma explained that there were indeed beings in the world, with little dust in their eyes. Those who were ready to hear the Dharma and capable of understanding it and achieving liberation. He argued that if the Buddha did not teach, these beings would be lost, forever circling in the cycle of suffering, bound by their karma, just as there are lotuses that bloom below the water, those that reach the surface, and those that rise above the water. So too were there beings at different stages of spiritual readiness. The Buddha's teaching was needed for those who were ready to rise above the waters of suffering. Moved by compassion for the suffering of beings and the plea of Brahma Sahampati, the Buddha resolved to teach the Dharma. His hesitation vanished, replaced by a deep sense of purpose and the culmination of the bodhisattva vow he had cultivated over countless lifetimes, the vow to seek enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. His own awakening was not just for himself, it was the necessary step to be able to show the path to others. The karma of his compassionate intention to help others, cultivated over eons, was now ripening, leading him to share his profound realization. He decided to teach first those who were most likely to understand, his 5 former companions. The ascetics with whom he had practiced self-mortification. Although they had abandoned him when he gave up extreme austerities, he knew they were serious seekers, dedicated to finding the truth. He traveled to the deer park in Sarnath, near Varanasi, where he found the 5 ascetics. Initially, seeing him approach, the 5 companions resolved not to greet him, still viewing him as someone who had abandoned the path of austerity for a life of ease. However, as he drew nearer, they were struck by his serene presence, his radiant countenance, and the palpable aura of peace surrounding him. Instinctively, they rose to greet him, offering him a seat. It was here, in the deer park, that the Buddha gave his first sermon, known as the Setting in Motion the Wheel of Dharma. This sermon laid out the core principles of his teaching, the very truths he had realized under the Bodhi tree. He spoke to the 5 ascetics about the 4 noble truths. The truth of suffering, dukkha. He elaborated on the pervasive nature of suffering, not just as pain, but as the unsatisfactoriness inherent in all conditioned things. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair are suffering. Association with the unpleasant is suffering. Separation from the pleasant is suffering. Not getting what one wants is suffering. In short, clinging to the 5 aggregates, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, which are impermanent, is suffering. The truth of the origin of suffering, samudaya. He explained that the origin of suffering is craving, which leads to renewed existence, rebirth, and is accompanied by delight and lust. Seeking delight here and there, that is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, craving for non-existence. This craving, fueled by ignorance, is the engine of the karmic cycle. The truth of the cessation of suffering, nirodha. He presented the possibility of ending suffering, the complete cessation of that same craving. Its abandonment, its relinquishment, its release, its non-attachment. This cessation is nirvana. The truth of the path to the cessation of suffering, magga. He then outlined the practical path to achieve this cessation, the Noble Eightfold Path. Right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. He presented this as the middle path, avoiding the extremes he had personally experienced. He explained each aspect of the Eightfold Path, detailing how cultivating these 8 factors leads to wisdom, panna, morality, sila, and concentration, samadhi, which are the pillars supporting the path to liberation. He described how right understanding leads to comprehending the 4 noble truths. Right thought involves cultivating thoughts free from ill will and cruelty. Right speech involves speaking truthfully and kindly. Right action involves refraining from harmful deeds. Right livelihood involves earning a living ethically. Right effort involves diligently cultivating skillful states of mind and abandoning unskillful ones. Right mindfulness involves being fully aware of the present moment without judgment. and right concentration involves developing deep, stable focus through meditation. As the Buddha delivered this first sermon, Khandana, one of the 5 ascetics, gained a profound insight into the truth of the teachings. He saw that whatever is subject to arising is subject to cessation. This simple yet fundamental realization, the truth of impermanence, was the beginning of his awakening. He became the first disciple, the first to gain insight into the Dharma. The other 4 ascetics soon followed, understanding the truths and becoming the Buddha's first Sangha, the community of practitioners. The Buddha's decision to teach was the ultimate act of compassion, the fruition of his long journey. He didn't keep the path to himself, he offered it freely to the world. His teaching was not based on dogma or blind faith, but on verifiable truths that anyone could realize through their own experience by following the path he had discovered. The 4 Noble Truths provided a framework for understanding suffering and its cause, karma driven by craving and ignorance, its potential cessation, and the practical steps, the Eightfold Path, to achieve that cessation. From that day forward, the Buddha dedicated the remaining 45 years of his life to teaching the Dharma, traveling throughout India, guiding countless beings towards liberation. His story, from a sheltered prince to the awakened one, is a powerful testament to the human potential for transformation, the possibility of breaking free from the cycle of suffering, and the profound impact of courage, perseverance, compassion, and the practice of meditation and mindfulness in understanding reality and finding true peace. His legacy, rooted in the karmic journey of his own awakening, continues to inspire millions around the world to look within and walk the path he illuminated. His body was still, a monument to resolve, seated firmly under the Bodhi tree. But within, a cosmic drama was unfolding. As Gautama delved deeper into the stillness of profound meditation, approaching the very core of reality, the forces that bind beings to the cycle of suffering stirred with immense power. These forces, personified as Mara, the tempter, represent not just external evil, but the deeply ingrained patterns of craving, aversion, and delusion within every unenlightened mind, the unskillful karma that keeps the wheel of suffering turning. Mara is the lord of the sense realms, the power that delights in keeping beings trapped in the cycle of desire and attachment. Fearing the liberation that Gautama sought, his appearance at this critical juncture was the ultimate karmic test, a final opportunity for the forces of ignorance to reclaim a being on the verge of transcending them. Mara's first strategy was seduction. Knowing Gautama's past life of luxury, he dispatched his 3 beautiful daughters, Tana, craving, Arati, discontent, and Raga, desire. They appeared before Gautama in various alluring forms, radiating beauty and promising all manner of sensual delights and worldly power. They danced, they sang, they whispered temptations, trying to reignite the fires of desire that Gautama had so rigorously sought to extinguish. "Return to your palace, Prince," they seemed to purr. "All the world's pleasures await you. Why seek this difficult, painful path when joy is so readily available?" They invoked memories of his past life, of comfort, love, and sensory pleasure, attempting to create a powerful pull back towards the golden cage he had abandoned. This was a direct assault on his hard-won understanding of the unsatisfactoriness of conditioned pleasure. But Gautama remained unshaken. His mind, having seen the inherent impermanence and ultimate emptiness of such pleasures during his time in the palace and his subsequent reflection, was no longer captivated. He saw through the illusion, recognizing the fleeting nature of sensual gratification and the suffering that inevitably follows clinging to it. He understood that these were merely conditioned phenomena, arising from causes and bound to pass away, offering no lasting refuge. His awareness, honed by years of seeking and the recent clarity gained from the middle path, penetrated the seductive illusion. The daughters of Mara, their power derived from the mind's susceptibility to desire, found their charms ineffective against a mind that had cultivated detachment and clear seeing. Their attempts to bind him with the chains of craving, forged by countless past actions, failed. Recognizing their defeat, they vanished. Undeterred, Mara escalated his attack, shifting from temptation to terror. He summoned his vast army, a terrifying host of demons, monsters, and fearsome creatures. They were depicted with gruesome features, wielding deadly weapons, and generating a terrifying din of roars, screams, and howls. They hurled fiery missiles, unleashed torrential rains, and conjured up hurricanes, attempting to physically and psychologically overwhelm Gautama. This army represented the forces of aversion, fear, and aggression, the dark side of unskillful karma. They are the external manifestation of the internal torments of hatred, anger, fear, and despair that plague the unenlightened mind. Mara intended to frighten Gautama away from his seat, to make him abandon his quest out of sheer terror. Arrows, spears, and burning coals rained down upon him, but as they approached his serene form, they are said to have miraculously transformed into flowers, falling harmlessly around him. The ground around his mat of grass remained dry amidst the storm. The terrifying sounds did not disturb his inner stillness. Why? Because Gautama met this onslaught with profound equanimity and compassion. He did not react with fear or anger. He saw these projections as arising from the mind, not as external realities with inherent power over him. He understood that their power lay in his potential reactivity, his fear, his aversion. By remaining unperturbed, by cultivating a mind filled with peace and clarity, he disarmed Mara's army. His deep meditation, the fruit of immense effort and skillful action, good karma, acted as an invincible shield against the forces of ill will and fear generated by unskillful karma. Seeing his attempts at physical and psychological intimidation fail, Mara resorted to his most subtle and challenging tactic, doubt and questioning. He appeared before Gautama, no longer as a monstrous figure, but perhaps in a more imposing, authoritative form, and challenged his right to the seat under the Bodhi tree, his right to seek enlightenment. Siddhartha, Mara boomed, this seat of awakening is not yours. It belongs to me, earned through my vast power and merit. What right do you have to claim it? What evidence do you have of the virtue and merit that qualifies you for such a profound realization? This was the ultimate test, striking at the very core of Gautama's aspiration. It represented the internalized voice of doubt, the ego's resistance to its own dissolution, the societal and self-imposed limitations that make us question our worthiness for true happiness or liberation. Mara was demanding proof of the vast accumulation of positive karma required to become a Buddha, a process that takes countless lifetimes. He was trying to make Gautama doubt his entire journey, to feel insufficient, unqualified. In that critical moment, with no physical weapon or verbal argument, Gautama performed a simple yet profoundly symbolic act. He reached down with his right hand and touched the earth. This gesture, known as the earth-touching mudra, was his response to Mara's challenge. He was not appealing to a deity or a human authority. He was calling upon the earth itself, the silent, impartial witness to countless eons, to testify to the immense store of merit he had accumulated throughout his innumerable past lives on the path of a bodhisattva. Every act of generosity, every moment of patience, every effort in meditation, every instance of compassion, all the positive karma cultivated across vast periods of time, was registered in the fabric of the universe. And the earth was its witness. In response to this profound appeal, the earth is said to have trembled, or a voice from the earth arose, confirming the truth of Gautama's words. I bear you witness, the earth proclaimed, affirming the reality and immensity of his accumulated positive karma, his unshakable intention, and his right to seek the highest liberation. With this ultimate witness invoked, Mara was defeated. His final assault, the attempt to sow doubt and invalidate Gautama's quest, failed because it was countered not just by resolve, but by the undeniable weight of truth and accumulated merit. The forces of ignorance and suffering, personified by Mara, retreated, their power broken by the unshakable foundation of virtuous action and profound understanding cultivated over countless lifetimes. The way was now clear for the final, culminating realization, the penetration into the deepest truths of existence that would dawn in the remaining hours of the night. The battle with Mara was not just an external event, it was a profound internal victory. The vanquishing of the mental forces that perpetuate suffering, paving the way for the light of full awakening. The karma of doubt and hindrance was overcome by the karma of unshakable faith, diligence, and profound wisdom, having exhausted the wisdom of the most renowned spiritual teachers of his time, and finding that even the highest states of meditative absorption did not provide the ultimate liberation he sought. Gautama reached a critical juncture. He had mastered the techniques of deep concentration, samatha, capable of stilling the mind to a remarkable degree. But this stillness, while offering temporary respite from the turmoil of the world, did not uproot the fundamental causes of suffering, craving, aversion, and ignorance. He realized that profound insight into the nature of reality, vipassana, was needed. Something the teachings he had received did not fully deliver. His karmic path had led him through the avenues of worldly pleasure and sophisticated mental states. But the ultimate truth remained elusive, a treasure yet to be unearthed within himself. In that era, a prevalent belief among many spiritual seekers was that the body was the primary obstacle to liberation. The physical form, with its demands for nourishment, comfort, and pleasure, was seen as a source of attachment and desire, binding the spirit to the cycle of suffering. Therefore, to break free, one must conquer the body, subdue its demands through rigorous self-denial and extreme austerity. This path, known as tapasya, or asceticism, was considered a powerful means of purifying the mind and generating spiritual heat that could burn away karmic impurities. Gautama, ever determined to find the absolute truth, decided to pursue this path to its very extreme, believing that by pushing the body to its limits, he could transcend its limitations and unlock the secrets of liberation. This was his next great experiment, a pivot in his quest born from the conviction that the conventional paths were insufficient. He traveled to Uruvela, a remote and desolate region, where he joined a group of 5 ascetics who were already practicing severe self-mortification. These 5, Khandana, Bhatia, Vapa, Mahanama, and Asaji, were dedicated seekers who had left their homes in pursuit of spiritual goals. They recognized Gautama's noble background and the intensity of his quest, and they hoped that his unique dedication might lead to a breakthrough that they could share. With these companions, Gautama plunged headfirst into the most grueling ascetic practices imaginable. He resolved to minimize his physical needs to the bare minimum, believing that by starving the body, he could nourish the spirit. He progressively reduced his food intake to an astonishing degree, consuming perhaps only a single grain of rice, a single sesame seed, or a single jujube fruit per day. The Pali texts describe his condition in vivid, often harrowing detail. His body became terrifyingly emaciated. His skin shriveled and dark, stretched tightly over his bones. His limbs became like the knotty joints of dried creepers. His ribs protruded like the rafters of a dilapidated shed. His eyes sank deep into their sockets, resembling water at the bottom of a deep well. When he tried to rub his limbs with his hands, his hair, rotted at the roots, fell away. When he sat down, his backbone stood out like a string of beads. When he touched his stomach, he could feel his backbone through it. So little flesh remained. When he defecated, he fell over due to weakness. Beyond starvation, he subjected himself to other forms of intense physical pain and discomfort. He wore only rags, or sometimes nothing at all, enduring the biting cold of winter nights and the scorching heat of summer days unprotected. He would sit exposed to the elements, allowing dust and dirt to accumulate on his body, becoming indistinguishable from a wild animal. He slept on beds of sharp thorns, lay on the bare ground, or crouched in uncomfortable postures for extended periods. He also practiced rigorous breath control exercises, holding his breath until it felt as though a strong man was pressing on his head with a sharp sword, or tightening a leather strap around his skull. He pushed himself to the point where violent pains racked his body. Sweat poured from his armpits, and consciousness flickered. He explored practices that generated intense internal heat, seeking to burn away all defilements through sheer physical agony. His rationale was clear. Suffering inflicted voluntarily on the body would somehow negate the suffering inherent in existence. By mastering pain, he believed he could transcend it entirely. By denying the body's fundamental needs and desires, he sought to break the chain of attachment that bound the mind. This was an attempt to use one aspect of the karmic cycle, the experience of pain, as a tool to escape the entire cycle fueled by craving. He was fighting fire with fire, using intense physical suffering to counteract the subtler suffering caused by mental defilements and attachments. For 6 long years, Gautama practiced these extreme austerities with a fierce, unwavering determination that astonished his 5 companions. They saw his dedication, his willingness to endure suffering far beyond their own limits, and they became convinced that if anyone could achieve the ultimate spiritual realization through this path, it would be him. He became their leader in austerity, a beacon of extreme self-denial. Yet, despite his immense effort and the incredible physical suffering he endured, he did not find the answer. He achieved moments of intense concentration and perhaps even altered states of consciousness induced by starvation and pain. But these did not bring the profound insight into the nature of reality that he sought. His mind, instead of becoming clear and luminous, was often clouded by the sheer struggle for survival, preoccupied with the relentless pangs of hunger and the agony of his physical state. He was so close to death that his life hung by a thread. Yet the ultimate truth, the way to end suffering, remained elusive. He realized, through this direct, brutal experience, the fundamental flaw in his approach. Pushing the body to the brink of collapse did not lead to mental clarity or wisdom, it led to exhaustion and confusion. A body ravaged by pain and hunger was not a suitable foundation for deep meditation and insightful contemplation. True liberation required a balanced state, one where the body was strong enough to support the mind's efforts without becoming a distraction through either indulgence or extreme suffering. He had swung from one extreme, princely pleasure, to the other, extreme asceticism, and found that neither led to the cessation of suffering. This hard-won realization, born from the intense karma of his ascetic practices, was the final piece needed to fully understand the path he was destined to discover. The suffering he endured in these 6 years served as a crucial negative confirmation. Liberation is not found by destroying the body, but by integrating mind and body in a balanced, skillful way. Lying near death by the Niranjana river, too weak to even rise, Gautama had a profound moment of clarity. He remembered that childhood experience under the rose apple tree, when he had spontaneously entered a state of deep, peaceful concentration while his body was comfortable and at ease. That memory, so different from the forced, pain-filled concentration of his asceticism, illuminated the truth. The path was not through torturing the body, but through harmonizing it with the mind. He made the monumental decision to abandon his extreme ascetic practices. This was a difficult choice. It meant admitting that 6 years of agonizing effort had been based on a misunderstanding. It meant going against the widely accepted wisdom of the time that extreme austerity was the highest path. And it meant disappointing his 5 companions, who had looked up to him and believed in his approach. When they saw him accept an offering of milk rice from a local village woman named Sujata, a simple, nourishing meal that signified a return to a less severe way of life, they were dismayed. They concluded that he had given up, succumbed to the temptations of food and comfort, and abandoned his quest for enlightenment. Believing he had failed, the 5 ascetics left him, going to the deer park in Sarnath. Alone, but with a renewed sense of direction, Gautama consumed the nourishing milk rice. As strength returned to his body, his mind cleared further. He had found the middle path. The path between the extremes of indulgence and self-denial. This balanced approach, which would later be articulated as the Noble Eightfold Path, was the key. It was the path of cultivating wisdom, morality, and concentration in a way that supports, rather than destroys, the physical and mental faculties. The suffering of the past 6 years, the karma of extreme self-mortification, had finally revealed the necessity and the wisdom of this balanced way. He was now physically and mentally prepared for the final push, the deep meditation that would unlock the ultimate truth under the shade of the Bodhi tree.